Hello and welcome to our program, Where God Weeps, a program where we talk about the situation of the suffering church around the world. Today we're going to be considering the country of Nigeria, where fully 25 million of the 160 million are Catholic. To tell us about what joys this brings, but also what suffering this brings, it is my great privilege to welcome His Excellency Archbishop Kaigama of the Jos Diocese in Nigeria. Your Excellency, thank you for being with us here today in our program. Your Excellency, the Vatican has listed that of the 160 million strong population in Nigeria, 25 million are Catholics, which would make the Catholic population the largest in Africa. Why is the Church growing so rapidly and so strongly in Nigeria?
We are known to be religious people. I think we have been quoted in many ways to be highly religious. And Nigerians are attracted to spirituality, to religious worship. Go to Mass on Sundays, you see for yourself. And you go to the mosques, you also see Muslims in their numbers. So I think there is an innate desire for God.
And where does this come from? Why is this so specific to Nigeria?
It's just in the blood.
In the blood of the
system.
people.
Yeah, I think it's in the culture.
Yes.
Before Christianity and Islam, Nigerians were already having a highly developed spirituality in the pagan way, of course.
With a knowledge of one God?
No,
or were there many spirits?
Knowledge of a multiplicity of gods.
Okay.
God for farm, God for the fertility, God for life and all that. So these were the different gods being worshipped under different forms.
But when the Holy Spirit, when the missionaries came and presented the Holy Spirit, there was this attraction to the faith.
This certainly did happen, and that is why we could easily identify with Christianity. Like as a priest, my father was a traditional priest. I saw him performing rituals. I saw him retreating into a corner in order to have time with his God. And that affected me, influenced me. So I would say my vocation sprang from that traditional setup.
How did he react, if I might, just as an aside, how did he react when you said you wanted to become a Catholic priest?
I remember my father saying very clearly, he said, Ignatius, I sent you to school, but not to the priesthood. You chose the priesthood yourself. So remember, it is a tough assignment, it is a tough task. Since you chose it yourself, you make sure you meet the obligations of the priesthood, that you are a sincere and well-behaved priest, and so on. So he kept giving me that advice. I sent you to school, but not to the priesthood. You chose it for yourself, so be faithful to it.
Coming back to the question of the growth and this wonderful joy of faith in Nigeria, at the same time it brings a lot of challenges. What would be the key challenge, let's say, that Catholics or the Catholicism in Nigeria would be confronting?
Well, we want to express our faith without any hindrance, and we want to get the support of those in authority to practice our religion, and also get the support of our neighbors. Neighbors means those who do practice the traditional African religion, and then, of course, our neighbors, the Muslims. We need to coexist peacefully to be able to practice a religion that has meaning. Religion is about edifying, it's about building, it's not about destroying. Religion is about giving life, it's not about taking life. So we would want to see progress in all dimensions. The Catholic Church has been responsible for the provision of educational services, health services, social services in many ways. We would want to do this in an atmosphere of peace. And that is why when there is a threat to peace, we feel destabilized.
Now, this is key because we're now at this very time Nigeria is confronting a challenge to its very statehood, one might suggest. Because up to now, Muslims and Christians have been living relatively peacefully together.
Right.
Even though I believe 12 of the 36 states in Nigeria are under Sharia law, if you correct me if that's correct, yes. But up to now it's been relatively peaceful, but sadly there are elements, religious elements, radicals who are coming in trying to break down this fraternal relationship. Can you tell us a little bit about this and where it's coming from?
Yeah, sadly so, that this element is totally foreign and anti-progress in every sense. We started noticing this fanatical element in the 1980s with the advent of what we call the Maitatsine group. They came on board in order to purify Islam, according to them. But then, instead of purifying Islam, they went about killing people and destroying property and so on. Luckily, that was brought to an end. And then, from nowhere, we got this group known as the Boko Haram in 2009. And they also had similar, aims, to purify Islam,
yes,
ensure the authentic practice of Islam and so on, and then remove the obstacles to this kind of authentic practice.
Two quick questions. What does Boko Haram mean? And is this an internal movement, or is this something that's being encouraged or provoked from outside?
Boko Haram means a body constituted in order to fight what is considered to be an obstacle to the spread of Islam. And therefore, people interpret it to be a group that says Western education is evil, it's sinful, and therefore it's to be removed and replaced with the Sharia, that is the Islamic legal system. And they also started by hoping that they would be able to Islamize all of Nigeria and Nigerians. That is an unrealistic expectation. But anyway, they were quite determined. And nobody would have quarreled them for aspiring to Islamize anybody and anywhere. But when the element of violence was introduced, that was what saddened everybody. We allow religious freedom. The Buddhists, the Hindus, the Muslims, the Christians can evangelize anywhere, but without violence. Unfortunately, they brought in the dimension of violence and started killing and destroying aimlessly, which has brought us to this ugly situation.
And again, is this an internal Nigerian question, or is this being provoked also from outside?
I see it in two ways. It started perhaps as a Nigerian thing with some support from outside. And I believe when they started, they had good intentions. They wanted to make a point, yes, that certain corrupt practices that they witnessed brought by Western values and education need to be corrected. That's fine. But then how they suddenly turned very violent is what makes us wonder. So I believe there are external forces. There are also internal forces who would want to see the Islamization of the nation and of Nigerians. I believe so.
The curious thing, of course, is that the majority of people killed by Boko Haram are Muslims, not Christians, because the majority of the attacks have occurred in the north, where the majority of the population is Muslim. So there's a contradiction going on somewhere. And I think perhaps we in the West, we make a simplistic saying it's Christians against Muslims, when it's not in fact the case at all.
Yes, I have tried to correct that in many places, that it is overgeneralizing, to say the problem or the crisis in Nigeria is about Muslims and Christians or about the North and the South. I said no. So we have to isolate each crisis, analyze its context, and be able to come out with the proper name. But unfortunately, we end up baptizing every crisis as religious and thereby fueling more crisis. Because you see the young people who just tell you, small children who tell you, oh, Muslims and Christians are fighting. When the media keeps harping on the fact that Christians and Muslims are fighting, this gets into the bloodstream of the young people, of the children, they grow up with these. And so we said, look, let's just isolate the cases. Like the situation in Jos. I said the crisis in Plateau State was not all religious. There were strong religious elements, but people forgot to mention the fact that there were land issues. You have problems of herdsmen and farmers.
And ethnic problems.
Ethnic problems. You have politicians aspiring to outdo one another, and therefore they find religion a very useful tool. When you sack, let's say, a minister in the government, instead of considering that he has been sacked because of his inefficiency or lack of performance. No, the interpretation is always because I'm a Muslim, or because I'm a Christian, that's why I was sacked. He wouldn't tell people that he was sacked because of inefficiency or corruption. So I said people have used religion wrongly and dangerously, and that is why we have this situation.
They've been targeting police institutions, government institutions, but also churches. What is the purpose of attacking churches?
It's to terrorize. That's the aim of a terrorist, to terrorize, frighten you to submission and so on. Like I said, they want to Islamize Nigeria and Nigerians. But they forget that evangelization is by peaceful means. But they are using force and violence. You can never get to convert anybody. So their aim is to get everybody and everywhere under the sphere of Islam, but they use the wrong methods. Remember, before Madala, I had suffered an attack in Jos. Yes. The St. Finbarr's Catholic Church was attacked when worshippers were gathered for Sunday worship. Over 14 people were killed instantly, and many were injured. That happened before Madala. So there were cases of attacks here and there, and it was all aimed at frightening the Christians to submission or reducing the progress that has been made and all that. And I feel it's unnecessary and useless chase of shadows because they cannot succeed. The more they attack, the more Christians become more vibrant.
I want to come back to this question, Your Excellency, but before I do, I want to take a break. And we're going to watch now a short report on the story of the attack on the church in Madala.
Christians across Nigeria are becoming the victims of increasing violence. On Christmas Day 2011 in Madala, about 40 kilometers from the capital of Abuja, a car loaded with explosives was detonated just outside the grounds of St. Teresa's Catholic Church. 44 people were killed, over 80 were left injured.
There were a lot of people, and some of them were coming with some item for me to bless: rosary, crucifix, olive oil. As soon as I finished blessings, I was about entering the house. I heard just a loud sound. Bah! Twice.
The bombing, one of the deadliest in recent times to scar Africa's most populous nation, was carried out by the extremist militant Islamic group Boko Haram. This wave of terror, which is becoming more audacious and frequent, threatens to drive Christians from their places of worship. In the city of Jos, the Church of Christ in Nigeria headquarters were devastated in February 2012 by a suicide bomber.
You look up there, you see some of the pieces of the scattered car and the remaining engine of the car there. He was aiming at the congregation, and if God had not protected, it could have pulled this building down, and people could just have been buried down here.
Nigeria's Boko Haram, which in the Hausa language means Western education is forbidden, is a vague and undefined militant Islamic group with origins in the northern city of Maiduguri. At its outset in 2002, Boko Haram preached a doctrine of rejection of all things Western that, as they claimed, led to the country's social injustices. By 2009, the group's actions turned ugly. Boko Haram began a campaign of terror with assassinations and senseless suicide bombings, resulting in over 1,000 deaths. Police stations, churches, markets, schools, and even the UN headquarters in the capital, Abuja, have been attacked. To combat the spread of violence, the government has imposed a curfew in certain areas. Roadblocks and checkpoints have become an everyday experience for both Christians and Muslims. There is growing fear that Boko Haram is networking outside Nigeria's borders as their attacks become more deadly.
We know from intelligence reports that this Boko Haram group has been receiving training from groups outside of Nigeria, like the Al-Qaeda in the Maghreb and also the Al-Shabaab in Somalia. They have fraternal links with these terrorist, fundamentalist Islamic groups. The trainings they got are professional trainings, how to make the bombs. Nobody would have taught them that in Nigeria.
The minority Christian population in the predominantly Muslim north, where a stricter Sharia law is enforced, is increasingly the victim of threats and violence perpetrated by Boko Haram and its supporters. Entire families have been forced to flee their villages, leaving their property and lives behind.
Christians are being targeted and shot at. Sometimes they follow the Christians in their homes and shoot at them. The children you see me with know what a bomb is, know what gunshots are.
Amid this devastating wave of persecution, Catholic leaders have called for justice and order. They seek dialogue between the religious communities in the hope of mending the relations torn apart by terror. They want to avoid letting a violent minority draw the nation's attention to religious differences that to them are not the source of the conflicts at all. After the Christmas Day blasts in Madala, a centre for counselling and dialogue has been created by the diocese.
There is no revenge. Rather, we should pray for the conversion of the people who the perpetrators, as well as those who are financiers, who support this group called Boko Haram. We're in discussion to see how we can build small units of interreligious dialogue, interfaith dialogue, Muslims as well as Christians. And when we talk of Christians, we talk of other denominations, with the Catholic Church being the leader and bringing our brothers and sisters together. So my prayer is that the good Lord will rest the souls of all those who died, because I consider them martyrs. They died for Christ.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to our program Where God Weeps, where we're speaking with His Excellency Archbishop Ignatius Kaigama of the Jos Diocese, and we're speaking about Boko Haram and the terrible suffering of Catholics and Nigerians. Thank you, Your Excellency, for being here with us on our program. Your Excellency, I remember, I believe it was Archbishop Oniyakin who said he cried one tear, one eye for all the Christians that were killed, and he cried another tear for all the Muslims that were killed. It shows us often this perspective that we see only the Christian problem, but we forget that in fact out of the 44 killed, 22 were Muslims in this attack. The Boko Haram problem has been continuing. Most recently we've heard of over 200 young girls kidnapped and supposedly liberated, now Muslim. Why has the government not been able to get a handle on this issue? Why have they not been able to stop the violence that's been going on?
I would like to ask the same question, because I'm a Nigerian and I feel terribly saddened and actually traumatized by what is happening. To think of young girls who have not known anywhere beyond their environment been taken away in such violent circumstances and kept out of, their parental care and so on. It's tragic, it's evil. And I think everybody of goodwill condemns this. Every Nigerian I've met, Muslim or Christian, whatever, they say this is just wrong. This is anti-human, anti-social, anti-everything.
Yes.
So we are in great solidarity with the families of these young girls, very optimistic, that trusting in God that they will be found. But that the government did so little to liberate them even in the beginning is what baffles us also. But I think they underrated the whole matter. They thought it was something they could easily resolve by force or by whatever means. I think they really made that mistake. And
it seems that somehow the present government is not able to get a handle on the problem. They are sending soldiers in to attack, but sometimes what we understand is that the villagers are saying they don't know if they should be more afraid of the Boko Haram or more afraid of the soldiers, because Boko Haram is such a hidden group, it's hard to know who you're searching for.
We call them faceless, we call them invisible, because let's take the man who makes announcement on internet, on, Abu Bakr Shekau is supposed to be their leader, that he continues to make declarations and exploits the same Western technology that they condemn to advertise his cause. I think it's a thing of great concern that this man cannot be hunted, cannot be hunted down and brought to book. It's what baffles us. Yeah. And so there is a lack there, perhaps of proper intelligence coordination, or just the lack of political will to get this resolved. There must be a problem, because this has been going on for years. And it's only now the international community has woken up to do something because of the kidnapped girls. But I say we have been suffering for quite a long time. Many have died in terrible circumstances because of the activities of Boko Haram. Let's hope that this coalition that just surfaced recently would yield positive results. All we want is to have these girls back.
What is the position of the, let's say, if we can say the moderate Muslim? Is this question of Boko Haram on the positive side provoking a greater reconciliation and unity and common expression of revulsion against radical Islam and violence? And how do you and the imams, how do you and the Muslim community work together to try and stop what's going on?
Yes, in every evil, perhaps some good can come out of it. Dialogue was more difficult in the beginning. And when we attempted dialogue between Muslims and Christians, it was not easy. Some felt happy with the situation of things, and but with this particular incident, it has raised the awareness of every Muslim and Christian. Now I see the rallies and demonstrations in Abuja, in Maiduguri, in different cities of women, both Muslim and Christians coming together. This is very, very new.
Very encouraging.
Yeah, very new and encouraging. And now we hear statements, bold statements and declarations, even from Muslim leaders. The Sultan of Sokoto, who has been an advocate of dialogue anyway, in recent times has spoken more strongly than before. The General Muhammad Buhari, retired, who has been a presidential candidate, was identified by many before to be a bit religiously parochial. But now, because of this incident, he's spoken so boldly, very courageously. He calls these Boko Haram names, tells them this is not Islam. You are anti-human beings and so on. So we are getting this, perhaps, this is the good that...
Perhaps a greater unity within the society.
Yes, that we will continue to speak with one voice and allow the multiplicity of worship, the nature of worship, and not to force anybody to one religion or the other. I think Nigeria will benefit more if we just relax, coexist peacefully, enjoy religion. We like singing and dancing in church and mosque. Let's do that and make God happy and make ourselves happy. Why kill? Why destroy? Why take life?
Yes. Your Excellency, what would you say, what would you identify as your greatest need, perhaps for those who are with us today in our program? What would you say is your greatest need and how can we help you?
Now, the greatest help I would want is that everyone, collectively and individually, families, institutions, churches and all, should pray and ask for God's decisive intervention. Why do I say this? These people who commit these criminal activities, these terrorist activities, they have lost their mind. They have lost it. They have lost their humanity. We want God to restore to them this humanity. Once that is not done, the violence, the terrorism will continue. So if you ask me what I want first and foremost, that is what I want. A conversion of heart, a metanoia in these people who commit such terrible evil. That is number one. Number two, this is what has gone beyond what the church can do. There was a time when we called people to prayer, we preached peace and non-violence to them, we encouraged dialogue, but I think the stakes have been raised so high now that these issues hardly matter. What you need now is expertise. And that is where I believe the governments can do something. Our government in Nigeria, in collaboration with other governments, can get the experts to fish these people out, to identify their roots. Where do they come from? How do they organize? Where do they get the resources to buy cars, load them with bombs and explode them left, right, and center? How do they strategize? How do they plan? Who trains them? This is what I would want to have answers to. And this can be done only by government and then international cooperation.
Your Excellency, thank you very much for having been with us today on our program.
You're welcome. God bless you and keep every one of us well.
Thank you. And thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for having been with us today on our program, Where God Weeps. And I would ask if you could hear the call of His Excellency Archbishop Kaigama to pray for peace in Nigeria and for peace for all of us. Thank you, and we look forward to seeing you next week. Take care.